My name is Donald Anderson. I was born May 23rd, 1926. I had a twin brother named Arnold Ray, and we lived in Dyersville, about 12 miles below Marion. It's 12 miles to Morganton and about that same distance to Rutherfordton. So we really lived out in the country because we didn't have a car. Our transportation was by horse and wagon.
How is the world today different from when you were young?
Several things that come to mind is that practically all the roads were unpaved. Just the main U.S. highways and North Carolina highways were paved, and so it was very difficult to get anywhere. And of course, we didn't have a car, but we went in by wagon primarily. I remember one time going to school when we lived in Sugar Hill. I was a little older. I've jumped ahead a little, but we started the school and the bus got stuck. And so we worked to that bus trying to get it out from being stuck. And we got to school just as the bell rang to go home. So I think the kids enjoyed it, but I don't know whether that was the best for our education or not. But the roads were really bad, and sometime later, though, they did have a program in the state to try to, the slogan was to get the farmers out of the mud, and they were able to pave a lot of our rural roads, and I've always been grateful for that. Electricity was not available. We didn't have any electricity until after the war. So we had to have lamps. There's one on the mantle, an oil lamp for light. And we had wood stoves. My mother cooked on wood stove. All of this didn't get any better at our house till after the war. And then we had, of course, no running water. We either had to get water out of a spring, or a place or two we lived had a well, and we could, some of the people that didn't have electricity were able to get water, have a spring high enough above the house to have water by gravity. And that was a pretty lucrative thing, I always thought. Soon after the war, the Rural Electric REA program was passed, and they started bringing electricity to the more rural areas. And where we lived, we were between two roads, and we were cut off from electricity. But REA was threatening to come in, and so the other electric company worked day and night trying to get the power lines to our house. And of course, that was in about 1942 or 3, I think.
Tell me about your family.
My grandfather lived over on a large farm near Nebo, and it had 5 tenant farmers operating the farm. So my grandfather, whose name was Zachary Taylor Anderson, had 12 children. They were one of the 5 tenant farmers. I don't know much about any of my relatives before my grandfather, except I do know that his father and 4 brothers came here from Sweden, and I'd always thought I was Scotch-Irish. But they all had, the men had they were named after presidents. So that's why my grandfather was Zachary Taylor. And he lived to be 89 years old, which happens to be my age now. And my grandmother died earlier, and I don't remember much about her. That was my father's father. My mother's parents I never did know them. They had passed away before I was born. So when Lake James was built, then the water covered the farms, and so they had to move out. And my father moved to a place near Morganton, and he had 3 children at that time. And a year or 2 later, he moved to Dysersville. And as I said, that's where I was born. We stayed there, I think about 3 years, and the reason he moved away from there, the land was poorly drained. It was just too wet to do much with. So he found a place at over on Catawba River, north of Marion, north and west of Marion, just above the airport. And it had a good farm with fertile bottoms, and he could raise crops pretty easily. The problem with that was about every other year the river flooded and washed away the crops, and of course that put us in a hard position. But he managed to do work with his mules and do work on roads. They graded the public roads then with horses and mules, and drag pans pulled the horses, and he could haul sand, and he plowed gardens. And of course he raised practically everything they ate. And so it was pretty tough. That was by the time I was in the first grade, the depression was going pretty strong, and I began to realize how hard things were. But we stayed there several years. I don't remember that. Don't know how long, but my sister was a graduate from Pleasant Garden School, and she was valedictorian. So she was planning to go to college in spite of not having any money. But the owner of the property said that no girl would go to college from money from his farm. So my dad started looking for somewhere to go. And during that time, Farmers Home Administration was, I don't remember the name of the law that was provided funds for it, but it was Farmers Home Administration, and he applied for a loan to buy a farm. It was an act to help tenant farmers, and he luckily was first one to secure a loan in this county, and he the loans were made were 3% interest for 40 years. And the neighbors, some of the neighbors around there said that old man Anderson will never live to pay for it. And that was about 1938 or 39. He got the loan and bought the farm over at Glenwood and was able to move about in the fall of 1940. And I'll jump ahead a little bit. He was able to pay that loan off in 7 years without selling any land. Some of the other borrowers had paid off their loan, but they sold their land to pay it off. So he did that by raising crops and selling pulpwood and saw logs. And of course, during that time, the war had started and prices were picking up and things were getting better in that respect. In fact, I think sadly to say, the war got us out of the Depression. But anyway, we got along real well. But in the meantime, 1938 or 9, my grandfather had been living with us. He was disabled, and he liked the way my mother took care of him, and so he lived with us till he died in about 1938. And then soon after he died, my mother got sick. She died in 1940. My mother had asked my father to try to keep all of us children together and to get as much education as we could. And he always stressed staying in school and never talked about it a great deal, but we knew that that's what he wanted us to do. And so we were able to do that.
Something happened when your parents were taking your sister to college. Can you tell me about that?
About 1936, when my oldest sister graduated from high school and was going to college, she and her friend and her friend's father had a pickup truck and a car, and so he was taking my parents and my sister to school, and they were going to Lenore Ryan in Hickory. And they got down to Morganton. They, in a curve just before you get into town on old Highway 70, a lady came around the curve and hit them head on. And my father and his son, his friend's son, and two boys were in the pickup truck. The boys were in the back. They didn't get hurt, but my dad and his friend were hurt pretty badly. Their kneecaps were broken, and they were just not able to do much after that for a while. And the reason I'm getting into this story is since my dad wasn't able to work, my brother, who had just finished 9th grade, had decided that the only way we could make it would be for him to stay out of school a year. And he did. He stayed out for 1 year and did the farm work. And I know it was hard for him. During the time that my brother was out of school doing the farm work. My father's brother from down near Bridgewater brought some men in at critical times and helped Herman do some of the harvesting or plowing or whatever needed to be done. They helped him quite a bit, and we of course were appreciative of him for doing that. But then by the end of the year, my dad was getting better, and my brother Herman went back to school. When everybody said he'd never go back, he went back to school and graduated. And we were real proud of him for that. When he graduated in 1939, the war had started. My brother was old enough to be drafted, so he joined the Navy in 1942 and served several years. He was on most of his duty was on a minesweeper. They were just off the coast of the United States, eastern coast, and then the rivers in around Washington. And with the minesweeper, because the Germans had those waters mined. I don't know if the public knew that there was that much activity that close to us, but they did quite a bit of minesweeping. But soon as then they were in a storm, and he was thrown across the ship and landed on his elbow, and he broke his elbow, and it had to be pieced together with wires. And his left elbow has always been stiff since that time, and it handicapped him some, but not a great deal. And then, but he went back to the farm and stayed a little while after he got out of the Navy.
Please tell me about your experience in the military.
I had managed to somehow to graduate from high school, and I was 16 years old, and I weighed about 119 pounds and was 5'4", and but I was drafted in the Army as soon as I turned 18. I was out of here, and so I went into the Army and into the Infantry. And it was in August, and we went into basic training in Camp Blanding, Florida, and it was really hot. We had a tough time adjusting to the weather, and but I had a lazy eye, which I couldn't see very well out of my right eye, and still can't. But when we went up for their overseas examination, they pulled me and another fella out. He had something wrong with him too. And so I think that saved me, because the guys I trained with went, just little 18-year-olds went into the Battle of the Bulge. And many of them were killed. Anyway, this other fella and I were sent down to Clewiston, Florida, to a prisoner of war camp. And we were there until the war ended, guarding prisoners. And they worked in the cane fields. They had these huge fields of sugar cane. And a big sugar cane mill in Clewiston, in the town of Clewiston. It was a small place at that time, about like Old Fort. And we worked those prisoners, and it was an unusual experience. It really wasn't all that bad. A lot of those prisoners, and they were these stormtroopers of Hitler's super race, big old tall fellers and strong. But they, not all of them, but most of them were there because we think that they didn't much believe in the war, and they didn't want to sacrifice themselves for that, and so they were very well behaved, and I could go out in the fields with 30 or 40 of them and by myself and not feel in danger. We had very few that ever tried to escape, and the ones that did escape usually committed suicide or found them a girl to run off with. But that was unusual. Before the war was over, I was moved over to a prisoner of war camp in Fort Myers, Florida, at Pope Field, I believe was the name of it, at Air Base, and they worked those prisoners in laundries and different places in doing the maintenance of the stuff there at the Air Base. And then I went, I got a furlough and went home, and while I was home, I got transferred back to Camp Landing. And I don't know why, but I got to go back to that place. And while I was there, I worked in the gun room, taking care of the guns, issuing them and helping repair them and whatever needed to be done. And also a small section of the gun room was the mail room, and I was a mail clerk as well. So I'd pick up the mail, go to the post office, and get the mail, incoming mail, and have mail call. That was always a lot of fun to see the soldiers get their mail. And they really enjoyed getting letters from home. And then not too long after that, the war ended, and then I went to Fort Bragg and worked in the reception center there, where they were bringing recruits in. Stayed there for a few months till I was discharged. Yeah, that was in 1946, and I went home. My sister wanted me to go to college, and I had the GI Bill, and so I went to Lenore Ryan, and I really didn't care much about it, and it was a big change. I was only 20 years old, and to get into that group of people after having been with the kinds of people I'd been with, because in the Army there was all kinds of all different. There was a lot of difference in the people, and so I didn't feel comfortable. So Thanksgiving I just packed up my stuff and went home and didn't go back. So I didn't have much to do but to farm, so I worked there a little while, and In the meantime, there was a program enacted in Congress that let the men who lived on the farm have a veterans farmer training program. And so luckily for me, I had a good agriculture teacher in high school, and I learned a lot. I really did. And so my brother had already been hired as an instructor in the Veterans Farmer Training Program. And so after I went back home, they offered me a job. And so we had 4 groups of veterans. They lived on their own farm and they farmed, and our job was to spend at least 8 hours a month with each one of our students on the farm, helping them with whatever problems they had. We had class one night a week for 2 hours, and also we had field trips with things that would be worth taking their time for. And so that was really a good program. It helped them to get started back, get readjusted back to civilian life and get their feet on the ground. We had a real good shop at the school, and we taught farm mechanics and things like auto mechanics as well, because there's not much difference in the way a tractor and a car run. And we taught them welding, electricity, and metalworking and woodworking. So that was a good thing. And they'd come in there one day a month and work in the shop. And any time they needed to do some shop work, they could come to the shop and work on it. But I got to liking that teaching, and so I decided I would be foolish to lose a GI Bill that was available to me. So I went back to Lenore Ryan and took the first year, and the thought never entered my mind to go back home. And then after the first year, I transferred to NC State. After I'd been gone my first year from fall till Christmas, my brother decided he'd better go to NC State. So he followed me. He went directly to State, and he did real well. After my first year, as I said, I went to NC State too. He was married, and I, of course, wasn't. So he had a mobile home, and they had a place over on the hillside just off the main campus where the veterans who were married lived. And they had these trailers, and us single fellas called it Shotgun Village. But the professor, one of my professors, said one time that they really, when those veterans started coming back to school, they were really worried because they didn't know what they had on their hands, because those guys had been through all this stuff and killed people, and he didn't know what all. And so they were sort of worried, but said it didn't take them long to find out that those guys were there to study. And they were he said they're the best students they ever had. And because they would study and work, and if they graded on the curve, it made those kids right out of high school have a hard time keeping up with them. And I observed that to be true. the veterans made real good students. I know I was able to graduate in 3 years and a half when it normally was 4, so because I'd take extra work, and I was able to pass the stuff. So after we graduated from college, I went back home, and I graduated early and had to at December, and I didn't have a job, so I worked on the farm till the next summer, and I helped my dad put a bathroom and did the plumbing for the bathroom and kitchen, and because we had gotten electricity, and he was wise enough when he built him a house, he included a bathroom room for that. So he and I put the plumbing in, and in the Veterans Farmer Program, and we had built removable forms where we could dig a hole for a septic tank, and we made the walls of the septic tank straight up and down, and we put those removable forms in, that dropped those down in there, and left 4 inches around all sides and the bottom, and we could pour the septic tank that way. And we made covers to go on top. Now we did that for the veterans in their homes, and then I did it as well in our home, and I thought that was interesting as well as something really worthwhile. Not many years ago, my son did some remodeling on the house, and we had to check out the septic tank, which is years later, and that septic tank had been working perfectly all those years. Didn't even need pumping out. So we were proud of that. I'll get back to the time I graduated. I was getting worried about late in the summer that there wasn't any openings for ag teachers. Principal and the superintendent wanted me to go to Old Fort. They'd been trying to get a department approved for Old Fort, and so it did not get approved for that year. So they decided if I would teach 7th or 8th grade, I could do that till the department was approved. Well then, after I agreed to do that, Caldwell County had 4 new departments approved. So they needed 4 teachers, and they wanted me to come down there, and so the superintendent told them I could go down there for 1 year, but I had to come back the next year. So they agreed to let me come for 1 year. And so I went to Kings Creek. It's just east of Lenore. Beautiful community, and still is. And it was a good little school. And 4 of my friends that I'd graduated with went to Gamewell School and Collettsville School and Oak Hill School in Caldwell County. So we invaded Caldwell County, but we all got along well, and I just had 21 students that year, but they were nice kids. And I really enjoyed it. But then the next fall I had to leave. I had to come back. Old Fort, and I was anxious to come, to be honest with you, because I could live at home and help my father some on the farm. So they let me leave at Kings Creek, and I went back to Old Fort. And I stayed there 17 years, but that was an interesting experience. We had I had 4 years of agriculture. Agriculture 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I had 2 filing cabinets full of lesson plans, and I had plenty to teach them for 4 years. I made it a point not to teach the same thing twice. They knew that if they were going to get something, they had to get it in, because it wasn't going to be thrown at them again. And those boys, they really enjoyed the subject. The students were well behaved. I never did have any rules. I always figured when I heard rules in the classroom, I knew what that meant for me, because I was going to break them. So anyway, we'll not get into that. They just knew that I expected good behavior, and I always tried to respect the children. Actually, I thought of them as little adults, and I found out later that those kids were very little difference in them from the time they were in the 9th grade till after they got out of school. They never, very few of them ever changed. Only ones that I saw any major difference in was the ones who got on drugs and that sort of thing. Other than that, they were just little adults. And as I mentioned earlier, I had files full of lesson plans. I always figured if you have something worthwhile to teach, you won't have any discipline problems. When they came in, I was ready to go and whatever I had planned for that day. And if I saw the students' interest falling in what we were doing, I always had another thing to fall back on. I would change even in the middle of the class if I saw that what I was doing wasn't going over. And also I had another advantage that the average teacher didn't have, was at that time we only had boys. The law said that VOAG was to train farm boys for the proficiency in farming. And so that eliminated the girls. And but later on that changed. In the last few years I taught, I had girls in my class, and they were good students. They enjoyed what we were doing. And some of them have later have told me they wish they had taken it while they were in school, and I wish they had. But as a result, I didn't have any discipline problems. I just didn't expect any, and I never got any. And that's a good way for a teacher to look at it. You don't think you're going in there with a bunch of enemies. You know, one rule we had that I learned in college was the students don't want you to be their friend. They want you to be friendly to them, but they don't want you to be their friend. And I never did try to be buddy-buddy with any of them, but I was firm and the same thing all the time, and that worked out good. Another advantage I had is we had a real good shop. It was well equipped. The building itself, we had a classroom, a teacher's office, a storage room, a bathroom, a lumber room, and then the main shop, and off of it was a tool room where we kept all of our hand tools, and then a paint room. Of course, we had a welder back in the back of the shop, and a forge where we could do blacksmithing work. We had a radial arm saw, bench saw, planer, band saw, and drill presses and grinds. We had just a real well-equipped shop, and there's no reason why we couldn't do things if we knew how. So I tried my best to teach them how to use all of those things. And when we were, a lot of them, when they were not busy and their other class work, they'd come over there and work in the shop in their spare time. We had quite a few students who did that. And I allowed them, as long as they did what they ought to, I let them come. And of course, there was no problem, never any problem with that. After consolidation, we moved to McDowell High School, and I stayed there 3 years, and we had, that's when I had some of the girls, and they had a greenhouse the last year I was there. We had a real good greenhouse, and we raised a lot of plants, and they really enjoyed that. I never had a greenhouse at Old Fort, but I taught some of it, and they did it as their home projects, and we have one greenhouse that's still successful today, which one of my students started. Everybody can't go to college. Everybody don't need to go to college. But we were able to get some of those students well versed in fundamentals of things like electricity and carpentry and mechanics and that sort of thing. And today I still see some of those who have been successful in things that I know they learned over there at school. And now some of them are even retiring now, and that's good that you can see that they live to be retired, because we lost a lot of good students in Vietnam and some of those wars that they've had to go to. I think we just had a disproportionate a number in the South to get killed in some of those wars. I may be wrong, and I'll not get into that, but it's always good to see what they've amounted to. Now when I run into some over on the street or at one place or another, and Shirley's with me, they'll say, "Mr. Anderson, do you remember when you told us?" I think, oh my goodness, what's coming next? And they tell me some good stories, and but most of the time they're complimentary. And I saw one just a short time ago. He said, "Do you remember you told us common sense is just not too common?" He said, "I think I found that to be true."
How did you meet your wife?
My second oldest sister worked in a bookkeeping in a auto dealership in Old Fort, and Shirley's sister-in-law worked in there, and so they wanted to fix us up with a blind date. And so when my sister asked me about it or told me about it, I said, "No, I'm not interested. I'll pick my own dates." And so it didn't work out. Well, when I taught at Old Fort, the first year I was here, they got to having Halloween carnivals and stuff in the gymnasium, and my students made booths for the PTA to have people working in. So the second year I was there, I went in the teachers' meeting the first day of school, and Shirley was in there. And so that's when I met her at first. I just saw her. She was a 4th grade teacher. That didn't amount to much right then, but at Halloween, her sister-in-law's mother was in charge of this booth. And so they had Shirley working in that booth. And then she asked me if I'd work in that booth. We were selling candy, I believe. And so we worked together in the Halloween booth. Then after that, just first one thing led to another, and we got started dating, and that was about Christmas, I guess. And then on up in the spring, we decided to get married, and we got married in August. But it was sort of slow moving at first, but it worked out real well. And I just feel like the luckiest feller, the luckiest man in the world. We have been blessed with 3 sons, and they've all have done well. And like our parents were, we wanted them to go to college. So the oldest one went to Mars Hill and got a degree in business administration. The second one went to Wake Forest and majored in anthropology, but he went on a ROTC scholarship. That helped some. And then the other one, Greg, he always liked to farm, liked the cattle and everything we did, and he went to NC State and majored in agricultural education.
What did you do after your teaching career?
I decided to retire from teaching, and then went into real estate, opened an office in Marion. During my real estate career, all 3 of my sons at one time worked with us in the office. They were all 3 licensed real estate brokers, and also licensed real estate residential appraisers. And we were thankful for that.
Don, how long were you in the real estate field?
About 35 years. I taught school 21 years, and then I was in the Army and college, and then I didn't quit selling real estate till about 4 years ago. I was 85.
If there is one thing you'd want to tell a young person today, what would it be?
I would tell them that they should put their hand on the ladder of success and climb as high as they're able. That's the best advice I could give, I think.
If there is one thing you would like people to remember about you, what would that be?
Well, I've always thought if you think and do the right thing, what people think of you will take care of itself. That's it.
Don, thank you for letting me interview you today.
Well, I appreciate you asking me.